Right. Alright, let's get started. So, we come to point 1, and when writing any article, the first point that you have to consider is to find relevant search engine optimized keywords that will allow your article to rank in Google. There are many services that you can use to do this, but I'm finding using Neil Patel's Ubersuggest is the best way to do this. Before I go over to that, you'll see I'm working from a source document here, and this is just for ease of use to ensure that this runs smoothly. So I thought it might be quite cool to write this mock article that we're going to be writing today on something that's very close to me, and that's drums. I actually play drums, and so I thought it might be quite cool to use drums in the article. So if we're going to write an article about drums, then the main keyword that we're going to include in this article would be drum set. So I've typed in the word drum set into Ubersuggest, and it's brought up a set of relevant keywords relating to our main keyword. And I'm just going to go through a couple of them with you right now. So some of the keywords are drum set for sale, drum set electronic, drum set on sale, and drum set for kids. And you also see here that each keyword has a relevant search volume. And this means that a lot of people are searching for that particular word online. I will mention that when you're choosing keywords, it obviously makes sense to choose keywords that have a high search volume. But another factor to consider is relevance. So for our article, I thought it might be cool to write it on 4 tips to follow when buying a drum set. So relevant keywords would be drum set for kids, drum set electronic, drum set on sale, and perhaps drum set price. Whereas a word like drum set game, although it has a high search volume of around 1,000, it might not be relevant to the article that we're choosing to write. So that's the first point to consider when writing an article, is to choose relevant keywords related to your article and ensure that you use a service like Ubersuggest so you can see whether those words rank and whether they're usable or not. The second point that we need to consider is to stress your main subject line and an optional subheading. And what I mean by this is the title of your article. And this is important because it's the first thing that your audience is going to read when they read your article. And if that doesn't catch their attention, you're going to lose them almost immediately. So I've already developed a main subject line for my article, as I mentioned before, which is 4 tips to follow when buying a drum set. And then I've also included here an optional subtitle, and usually these will relate to your article and be a semi-short summary, and I find that it's best to open this with a question. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to paste my subject line and my optional subheading into our blank document here. Just bear with me. Experiencing some slight technical difficulties, but that should correct itself almost immediately. Sorry guys. There we go. Cool. So now we'll paste our subject line and our optional subheading into our blank document, which is where our kind of mock article is going to be. Okay, it should paste now. Cool. So now we have our main subject line, which is 4 tips to follow when buying a drum set. And you'll note that that also includes our main keyword, which is drum set. And then we have our optional subheading, which is looking to purchase yourself a drum set and feeling clueless, which is asking the reader or your audience a question and then kind of answering it. Not to worry, this short guide will give you the best 4 tips to follow when buying a drum set. So that now brings us to point 3, which is extremely important, and that is structured headings. If you don't have structured headings in your article, you're going to lose your audience because they're going to be lost when trying to decipher all the information in your article. They won't know where to start, where it begins, and it'll just be a massive mess of words rather than a cohesive article or blog article. So I've already decided on one of my headings, and because our article is named 4 tips to follow when buying a drum set, it makes sense that these headings will be the 4 tips. So I've named our heading tip 1, buying a drum set, and then as you'll see, I've used one of those secondary keywords that we saw when looking on Ubersuggest, and that was drum set for kids. I've just added in the versus adults part because it always makes a nice point of comparison and gives you a lot to talk about in the paragraph to follow. So I'm going to paste that heading beneath our kind of mock article that we have going here. And an important tip to note, this will save you time later and also appear more efficient, is to start each new tip or heading on a new page. And the reason for this is because later on you might want to insert images into your article, and these images will usually take up a portion of each page. So it helps to have it on a new page so that it doesn't get mashed together and create an untidy appearance. And now that brings us to our fourth tip, which is your opening paragraph lines. So with each of your structured headings, you'll then obviously have a paragraph below depicting the content of that particular heading. And the most important thing to note is that your opening paragraph line should include a few elements, and I'll show you what I mean. So I've typed my opening paragraph line for that title over here, which is kids, the topic being kids versus adults, buying a drum set for kids versus adults. So we'll paste this in here below our heading. Just ensure that your spacing is correct. Usually leaving one space between them is fine, but in some cases you might not want to. So now we've got our opening paragraph line, and that is, when considering 4 tips to follow when buying a drum set, you should first consider whether you're buying a drum set for kids versus adults. You can end that with a full stop. So you'll see what I've done here. I've included the title of the article, which is 4 tips to follow when buying a drum set. I've included our main keyword, which is drum set, and I've also included one of our secondary keywords, which relates to the topic that we're discussing, which is drum set for kids versus adults. So buying a drum set for kids is a keyword that has been included in there. And you'll follow suit with all your opening paragraph lines for all of your structured headings. They should try and include your main subject line or the heading of your article, definitely your main keyword, and then obviously the secondary keyword that structured heading pertains to. So now that brings us to our next tip, which is of course inserting relevant images. So when doing an article, images are a great point of interest for readers, and they feel that they don't just have to focus on text the entire time. An image obviously brightens the view and creates a far more interest in your article. But the importance, as I've mentioned here, is the relevance of your images. So if we're writing an article on buying a drum set, I don't think having an image of drumsticks or something like that would be as relevant as having an image of a drum set itself. So I've already found an image, and I'm going to insert it into our mock article over here. And usually you'll have the same amount of images as you have structured headings, plus an additional one for your conclusion of your article, and obviously one to start your article as well. So I'm going to paste my image in here, or insert it rather. And you'll see what I mean when I insert this image, why it helps to have each structured heading on a separate page. Because you'll see these images, depending on the size, they can obviously be smaller, but they tend to be larger and take up a fair bit of space. Cool, so now you'll see we have our image. Also ensure the spacing between your image and your subject line title is well spaced. But now you'll see that image takes up almost half of the page. So to have an additional paragraph below that, you're not going to be able to fit much in, and if you do, it's going to look kind of messed up and just too close together. So now we have an irrelevant image, and it looks good. That moves us to our next point, which is inserting an infographic. So infographics are usually larger images, and they may have text as well. They usually have text, and they're basically an informative image, hence infographic. So I'm going to insert an infographic into this article, and you'll see it inserts in much the same way as an image does. You can also get your infographic to wrap around text if you are inserting it into a paragraph, but either way is acceptable. Cool, so now you'll see my infographic has been inserted, As you can see, it's a much larger and longer image. So it's the anatomy of a drum kit infographic. You'll see there it's labeled as well, and then it also has text, as most infographics. You insert an infographic into your article. And that brings us to perhaps our final point, and one of the most prominent points, which is backlinking or cross-linking. So backlinking or cross-linking away from your article to another relevant page with information that backlinks that you include in your article, the higher your article will rank on Google. 3 per paragraph, but obviously if your paragraphs are longer, then you'll have more. So you'll see here I found our backlink, which is www.schoolofrock.com resources, buying a guide on how to buy your first drum set. So what we want to do is we want to include this link in our paragraph text, but we can't just paste the link in there and expect people to follow it. It looks untidy and it doesn't create the right effect. So what we want to do is have it embedded in a line of text. So our line of text here is unsure of where to locate a buying guide on how to buy your first drum set. And then what we do is we'll take our link here, which is buying guide on how to buy your first drum kit, and you'll see that the text in our article, buying guide on how to buy your first drum kit, lines up with the text in our line of text over there, which is buying guide on how to buy your first drum set. So when you embed this link, try and have the text as close as possible to the text that you're linking it to. So then we'll copy this link and insert it over here, buying guide to buy your first drum set. Link it over here, paste it and apply the link, and now you'll see unsure of where to locate a buying guide on how to buy your first drum set. So when they're reading through your paragraph, and we'll paste this into our main article or mock article, then they'll see buying guide on how to buy your first drum kit, and that'll take them to a page which includes a buying guide or whatever relevant text you've decided to link it to. So I'll scroll down here, find our text, and then we can insert that over here. Cool. So now our text reads as follows. When considering 4 tips to follow in buying a drum set, you should first consider whether you're buying a drum set for kids versus adults. Unsure of where to locate a buying guide on how to buy your first drum sets, and then obviously more text will follow. But yeah, the importance of hyperlinks and backlinking, I can't stress enough. The more links you have, the higher your article will rank in Google. And that brings us kind of to the end of the 7 points, but I do want to discuss one more important aspect for further optimization enhancements. And that is your alt tag. And an alt tag has twofold effects. The first is that it allows the Google Spider to locate your article quicker. And it also helps if, for example, your audience is experiencing low connectivity. If your audience is experiencing low connectivity, images might not load on the page properly, and then your alt tag will also feature a description of the image, which will allow your audience to still read the text of the image and assume what the image will depict, even if they can't actually see the image. So you'll basically insert that directly below your image as follows. So our image is up top here. Let me just scroll up. You'll have to bear with me for 1 second. All the way to the top. Okay, cool. And just ensure that when you insert your alt tag, that it is properly spaced and is directly below your image. As follows. Cool. So that kind of brings us to the end of 7 ways to write a better blog that ranks in Google. And let me just recap the tips that I've discussed with you today as follows. So tip 1 is relevant SEO keywords from Neil Patel's Ubersuggest or any other similar service such as SEMrush. The second point is to stress your main subject line and perhaps include an optional subheading. Point 3 is please include structured headings in your article to make it more easily readable by your audience. Number 4 is opening paragraph lines, which are crucial to grabbing the attention of your audience, and also if you include your subject line and your relevant keywords, it'll allow your article to rank in Google much better. Point 5 is inserting relevant images. So when you do insert images, ensure that they are relevant to the topics that you're discussing. Otherwise, you will also have a chance of losing your audience. Point 6 is inserting an infographic. And as I mentioned, those are informative images that will pertain to the topic that you're discussing and just create more interest for your reader as opposed to just generic text and images. And point number 7, proper backlinking or cross-linking. As I mentioned, the more backlinks or cross-links that you have in your article, the higher it's going to rank in Google. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'll be taking any questions if anyone has, and I'll be reading through the chat now.